Welcome to our workshop on early intervention for children ages 0 to 3. This workshop is in collaboration with the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. We're very thankful to have Ms. Angie Liu as our speaker today. Angie is the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center Child Development Specialist. She received her BA in Psychology and Human Services from Pomona State University. She has worked for 21 years at the Regional Center, and for 11 years, she worked with the Early Intervention Services. And she has a total of 30 years of experience in the field of social services. Let's welcome Angie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angie. I am with the Regional Center, San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. And there are 21 regional centers across the whole California, and ours is one that is in your area in catchment. So today we are talking about early intervention. So what early intervention, the program that we have under the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center is, it's basically a federal response to the California's response to the federal legislation ensuring that early intervention services for infants and toddlers with disability or learning delays or any type of delays, developmental delays, to have a program that is coordinated with family center system to provide services. So how do we refer for a referral? So why do we want the referral? Anytime a parent is concerned with any type of developmental disability, delays, I'm so sorry. So the delay would be anything under the 6 category. One is the cognition, one is communication, which break it into 2 areas, the motor component, as well as the social, emotional, and adaptive. So anytime that there is any concerns at all, especially parents, if you have concerns about your little ones, any of those concerns that you feel like your little one is a little delay, or you just have concerns with that, just come in for that referral, give us a call, and then just make that referral. A lot of times we do get referrals from hospitals, physicians, pediatricians, community partners, and early Head Start. And then those that are under the court cases, that will be under DCFS. And then there will be family and friends that would talk to the parents, or even in the community. I do have a lot of referral that came in because the little baby was playing at the park. And then another parent says, hey, have you heard of Regional Center for the early intervention? And then sometimes that's how a parent comes into, the child comes into our services. When can you make those referrals? Anytime that you are concerned with the baby at all, just come in, the sooner the better. Because our early intervention service, it's only up to age 36 months. So our goal is to get everyone in before then so that services can start. The more intervention, the better. And then how do you make the referral? Parents can give us a phone call or online. You can go on our website as well as walk into our office. Our office is in Pomona, and there will always be a staff at the admissions office that will walk you through any kind of walk-in during business hours. We do take those as well. So in an assessment, so when you call in and get the referral, when a parent calls in and get the referral started, there are 3 types of assessment, not just, one, but not limited to one. It could be depending on what the child's, what are your concerns, right? So the overall developmental assessment would be conducted by an occupational therapist. And then and then we also have a team of the physical therapists as well as speech pathologists, or depending on the child's age, perhaps the psychologist will be the one to do the developmental assessment. So when a call comes in, the admissions coordinator will ask the parents as far as what are your concerns. So if a parent has concerns with a child not speaking or not having very limited vocabulary, and then the assessment coordinator the admission coordinator, I'm so sorry, would ask several questions in which not only pertaining to speech, but for the other developmental milestones. Does the child walk? If your child is 16 months, is the child? If it's 12 months, is the child crawling by then? Are they pulling themselves up to a standing? The other thing would be they also would ask, how is the child's feeding habits? Is the child eating okay? Is there choking or any type of those concerns? And if those are the concerns, then the assessment will be according to those concerns, meaning you can have an occupational therapist that does a full developmental for the child. On top of that, we will do a speech evaluation because of the speech concern. So those will be, or it could be all three, right? It could be a developmental assessment by the occupational therapist, depending on what the issue is, and then the speech pathologist. And then if there's physical motor concerns, such as the child's not walking and the child is already at 16 or 18 months, we also would have included the PT, the physical therapist, to also do the assessments. Now, in order to qualify for service, there's these 4 categories that we look under. The most important is the child has to be under 36 months. So one of the area is developmental delay, and I'll go over it in the next slide. So we have developmental delay, established risk, high risk, or developmental disability. And according to one of those, if a child meet one of those criteria, they will qualify for early start service. So developmental delay. So developmental delay is anything that a child is, when the assessment comes back, depending on what level the child is at. So we're looking at cognition, whether or not the child's understanding of the things that are being communicated. Receptive is how the child receives the information. Expressive is how the child express, right? That's the verbal coming out. And then the motor skills, the fine motors and the gross motor, the little muscles and the big muscles. And then we also have the social emotional development. Is the child able to be with other children? Is the child, how is that social part of the component? And then the last one would be adaptive, self-help skills. So self-help skills would depending on the child's age. For example, a child who is 6 months, a baby who is 6 months old, we were looking at like whether or not a baby can self-soothe, right? If a child's crying, the baby's crying, whether or not when they're really young, would they be able to put their little thumb into their mouth to soothe themselves? That is a self-help skill. When the child's a little bit older, perhaps like 2, if the child's hot, does he know how to like pull off his socks? And then a little bit older, does he know how to put on his socks or start feeding himself? Those are what we call self-help skills. And that's one of the category. So then we also have established risk. We don't do this as often anymore, but a lot of times when a child comes in and every level of development checks out, meaning the child is at age level. However, we would know that the child might have a genetic or congenital disorder that eventually might slow the child down, like that they don't develop like the typical child, that eventually they would slow down a bit. Like historically, if we see that, then that's what we call established risk. Okay, so we will get questions at the end. I think I have plenty of time, so don't worry. Write it down. Now, the third one is high risk. This one is, we do have this one, and this is when a baby is premature. So if the baby is born 32 weeks or less, that's a premature baby, or less than 3 pounds, right? So that that will be coming in. Those babies will come in, and even though the developmental level would most likely not be delayed because they are premature. And so since we are gauging them in the adjusted age versus the chronological age, it would show that they don't have delays. However, they're premature. So we wanted to make sure that we monitor them. Under this category, you just have to have two, right? So if a baby is premature, did the baby have respiratory distress? Was the baby on ventilation for 48 hours after birth? That would be something that that would be the two category. Or exposures to alcohol, right? So that will be a second choice. Now, let's say everything checks out, the baby's fine. The only thing the baby have is prematurity. The baby is not exposed to alcohol, and the baby was not was not on a ventilator. But the team who is determining this child for eligibility, that team on the very, very last one, it says informed clinical consent. And so when we look at all of the assessment, we do have a panel that determine whether or not the child is eligible. And so that panel would discuss whether or not this baby, even though on paper everything looks fine, the baby is premature, but we also really didn't feel that the baby is completely independent, meaning like that the baby would benefit from some type of early intervention just to monitor. So then the clinical team, the informed clinical consent, that panel will decide that this is what consensus, right? So if they have consensus, so that's one, and then the prematurity is the second qualifying factors. And with those two factors, the baby qualified for service, and that's how we go. So that's what we call high risk. A lot of times the premature babies, when they are in the hospital, typically, and that's how we would like it, is if a social worker at the hospital will refer that to the parent, like, when you leave the hospital after the NICU, please give regional center a call, and then we will do the assessment. And then a lot of times you do have parent that says, but my baby is fine, which of course the baby is fine. However, we just wanted to kind of keep an eye on the baby. A lot of times the premature baby, it could be, so just the OT that would monitor that baby. And then eventually some of these premature babies are very resilient, and then they will graduate from the program. But we just want to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks. So we want to make sure that we monitor, and that's just basically for monitoring purposes, especially for the premature babies. And then the last one is developmental disability. So a development disability is the actual diagnosis. And you usually find these, especially, so there's intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, autism spectrum disorder, and epilepsy. A lot of times we do see the children with like cerebral palsy or epilepsy. That's more of the medical portion, right? The baby who has seizure episodes, that would be under the diagnosis of epilepsy. So then those would be, the doctor will qualify them for service. The intellectual disability and the autism spectrum disorder, that would mainly gets determined when the baby is a little bit older. So this a lot of time falls under children that come in a bit late, like perhaps 30 months or 32 months. That's the time that a psychologist will already give the child a diagnosis, and that qualify for service as well. So the timeline, let me talk to you a little bit about the timeline. So the timeline for the referral. So if you call in, a parent calls into our office today and said that I have concern for my child, I want my child to be assessed. So that, and then that intake coordinator, the intake worker will take that information, and that day starts their timeline. And so from there, they have to do the intake, basically take the information down, and then the admission coordinator start working on getting the assessment, getting the specialist to go out and to do those assessments for the baby. So, and then they have to get all those reports done. And then once the report comes in, the eligibility team, which consists of a lot of times it's either a nurse or a doctor, an occupational therapist, the speech pathologist, and the admissions coordinator or the admissions manager. And so they'll sit there and they'll look through all the assessments and the results, and then they determine if the child is eligible for service. And then if the child is eligible for service, then they will be assigned a service coordinator that will do the initial IFSP, Individual Family Service Plan. Okay, so that service coordinator will do that meeting. So from step 1 to 5, all that must be done by 45 days. That is a very short window for everything to get done. So, things moves very, very fast. So we usually tell the parents when the specialist calls you to schedule that meeting to come to your house to get it done, that's how quickly we move them, because those are our requirement, right, to get it all done. Otherwise, we'll be out of compliance. So, for example, if a parent calls in for a referral, and then they fail to be at home when the schedule assessor comes to do the service, and then it drags on and on, that admission coordinator will have to have a talk with the parents, because we really need to do that timeline, to meet that timeline. Then number 6, so after the initial IFSP, where the service coordinator comes and talks to the family, talks to them about the finding of the assessments, the recommendation from the panel, right? Whether or not the child needs, what type of services the child needs. And once the parent agrees to those services, that service coordinator has 30 days to get that service implemented. And what that means is that they will have to have a therapist, an ongoing therapist, to come to the home and start that service within the 30 days. So services that we provide once a child is eligible. So you would have a service coordinator that helps coordinate those services. That service coordinator will be the one to look for the companies, the vendors that will come in and do those services. Our services is what we call natural environment, and the states require that we provide services under a natural environment. And the natural environment is being at home. The baby's most natural place is at home. So the services must come to the home and get them done. Meaning that if a child's needs a speech, the speech pathologist will come to the home and do that service, versus for them to come to the clinic, because that's not natural. The natural will be whatever the baby's setting is, whether or not it's at parents' house or grandma's house, or if both parent works and the child is always at that daycare becomes a natural environment. So the service coordinator would have to find those find those vendors that will come and service the family at home. The other things that we do when we do the assessment is we do a screening, a really quick screening on the vision and the hearing while they do that assessment, just to make sure that hearing isn't an issue, especially for those children that we are concerned that they're not responding. Could they be on the spectrum? That's why a lot of times when we do the very basic screening, if the child doesn't pass that basic screening, then we will refer them out for a full vision evaluation and a full audio evaluation. So once all those assessments and everything else got all completed, and then the services starts. So typically we have the occupational therapists that will do any type of OT type of things. For example, could be all motor. If a child chokes whenever he eats big pieces of food, that is an oral issue that we would be concerned with, right? If a child who is 2.5 but cannot seem to hold on to a spoon to feed himself, that's an OT that would do that. A child who is very, very sensitive, can't touch anything, can't touch sand, can't touch anything wet, that will be a sensory issue, and the OT would address that. Physical therapy would be if a child at 10 months, 11 months is still not crawling, it's not rolling up to a sitting position. Those would be the PT that would address that. A child who is 18 months is not walking, that will be something the PT will work with the child. A lot of times, the typical family that comes through, the majority is the speech, right? Even a child who understands everything the parent says, but doesn't say it, doesn't come back out and say. So that would be like the receptive is high, but the expressive is low, right? So then you would have a speech pathologist that work with the child. So those are the, and then the other thing we also add on is typically we add on what we call specialized instructions. A lot of times that's also included in the service. And that is a person that comes in and works with the child in the overall development, right? So if a speech is working with a child, that infant teacher will come, the specialized infant teacher, a specialized instruction teacher will come and work. Basically, we iterate the same type of lesson that the child's learning. We are also, the ideal is to have the parent present because so then there is a parenting component to it. So when a parent, so we always say, you know, the parent gets to witness how the therapist is working with the child. The therapist sees the child maybe once or twice a week, so for an hour each, but the parents are with the child 24/7. So even after the therapist is not there, the parent can continue to reiterate those lessons and then continue to add on that lessons for them. I also have in here transportation. So transportation, for example, if there is a reason why the parent doesn't have the available of transportation, if they don't have a car or if some type of issue that has to do with transport, like they cannot get to a clinic or they cannot come to us, if the service is like if an assessment's at our office, any of those things, talk to the service coordinator and the service coordinator will help with that transportation portion. All that to say, we don't want any of those to be a barrier. We wanted to make sure that the child gets the services he or she needs. So when a child, let me go back. So when a child is found eligible for service, the service coordinator will stay with the family until the child is 3. All services ends at the age of 3. These are called early intervention services, the OT, the PT, the specialized instruction, and the speech. They are all early start services and they end at age 3. So typically when a child is getting those services, they're under age 3. And so you would think, well, what happens if the child is not completely at age level by the time he or she turns 3? You know, since we're closing out, like we finish, what do they do? So we also have that layer is what we call the transition process. And what that is at 2.5, the service coordinator will talk to the parent and say, your child is about to turn 3, so we are going to start that transition process with your local school district. So the local school district will be under whatever the family's residential address is. It cannot be a different district. It has to be under by law, the family where the family lives. So the service coordinator then will contact the district that the family lives in and let them know and schedule a transition meeting. And then that transition meeting, the parent will meet with the district and then to talk to them about what the concerns are, what kind of services the child is getting at the regional center, and to prepare them. And so what that means is that then the district, by the time the child is almost 3, typically about 30, the beginning of 36, the beginning of 35 months, right? When the child is about to hit, like maybe a few weeks about to hit 3 years old, the district will schedule that assessment. And then that's a different set of assessment the district will do. And they would also then determine whether or not the child still has those delays. And so if the child has those delays, then that school then would have an IEP for that child and offer services for the child after age 3. So ideally, this transition would be seamless, right? When this, so let's say summer is a little different because they have school breaks. But let's say if the child is turns 3 in the beginning of October. So and if a child's birthday ends on a Wednesday, 1 month of the month of October on a Wednesday. And then that Wednesday, all services with the regional center will finish. The following Monday, the child will start getting services with the school. If that transition is seamless, that's how it goes, okay? At 30 months, the service coordinator would also talk to the parents about a psychological evaluation, meaning the very last assessment for the baby. Does the parent want one? I always recommend that. And this is, it's called psychological evaluation, but it's basically just an evaluation to see where your child is at. Is there any concerns in regards to intellectual disability or autism spectrum disorder? So the psychologists will be able to make those determinations. We just want to make sure that the child, before we let that child go, that to make sure that there isn't any other concerns. Recently, maybe in the last 2 years, so let me go back. So years ago, when a psychological came back and the child is not intellectually disabled, does not have autism or cerebral palsy or epilepsy. And so we finish, right? We finish our early intervention and the child goes to school. But there was no evaluation, psychological evaluation done. Then the child comes back, maybe at 4, saying, oh, something is not right. And then we do the psychological evaluation. That takes a complete process all over again, right? So it takes a long time from there. Also, sometimes we do have kids that come in. I mean, they are part of our early intervention, and then they do have the psychological evaluation, but there wasn't any impression at that time. And then the child continue on, and then they come back again. So we didn't want those. Those are some of the issues that we always have with the state also. So they implemented 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, 2 years, I believe, a provisional eligibility, meaning that the child who is not found eligible for any of the, not intellectually disabled or cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or autism, but they are delayed in the area on the right side, the self-care, the receptive, expressive learning, mobility, and self-direction. So under the provisional eligibility, if they have 2 of those if they have 2 of those areas, they will call what we call provisional eligibility. So they will continue with that. So under the provisional eligibility, we kept the baby when the baby is not eligible to continue with regional center services, but we want to keep this baby until the 5. And then within those 2 years, a service coordinator kind of watch them, monitor them, make sure that the school services are all set up. And then we'll do another evaluation, whether or not the one that we look at the school or the one that we are going to do again, to make sure that this child is, there is no intellectual disability or autism present, right? Then they move on. That's really helpful, this provisional eligibility, because it gives us a space, a time to kind of hold on to the little one, to make sure that they are doing okay before we basically let them go. So if a psychological came back when the child either has intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or autism, what we call Latterman eligible. And what that means is that they will continue with the regional center under one of these diagnoses, and they will be assigned for a service coordinator that will oversee, that will help them with advocacy at the school to make sure that the child is developing. And so now remember, with the Latterman eligibility, even though they are eligible to continue, early start services still gets finished, right? Because that's a different type of services. Under the new service coordinator, the new the Letterman eligibility, that service coordinator can help the parents with school, IEPs, and then whatever else that might be needed. For example, a lot of that, sometimes the service coordinator can help parents to work parents through accessing insurance for these services, those type of support for Letterman eligible. Our catchment area, we go all the way from Altadena and then up the 210, which is Sierra Madre, all the way out to across the 210 to Claremont. And then we come down Pomona, and then our office is in Pomona. And then it comes down to Diamond Bar side, Rowland Heights, and then we go all the way back up to La Puente, Amonte, Temple City, Acadia, and then a little bit of Pasadena. So that's our catchment area. So any family that lives in this catchment area belongs to our San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. This is our contact. We are at, we're in Pomona. So the referral does not, you do not need to come into our agency to get the referral. You can just make a phone call. You can email us. Any of that should suffice. And then most of the time the assessment comes through, and a lot of times, especially for baby, for intervention, the specialists come to your home to do the assessment. The only one that the family have to come to our office is the psychological evaluation. Everything else, we come to you. We come to your home. And I just also wanted to make sure that you understand that these services are free. You do not need a referral from a doctor to refer your child. As long as you have concerns, just call us, and then we start the referral, the assessment process. So no referrals needed, and there is no fee. Even when you have ongoing services, there is no fee. There is no copay. That is free. Okay. Thank you. I'll take questions.